Part 1: The Unseen Path. The rain poured relentlessly, soaking the streets, turning them into rivers. The sky was a dull, threatening gray, and the heavy downpour made it feel as if the world itself was in turmoil. I stood outside the airport waiting room, staring out into the storm, my eyes scanning the sea of umbrellas. Time seemed to crawl. More than an hour had passed, and the person I was waiting for still hadn't arrived. The thought of calling them crossed my mind, but then I stopped. Why should I? They weren't coming. Not this time. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my fingers trembling as I unlocked it. With a sigh, I opened WeChat and scrolled through my moments, something I hadn't bothered to do in days. My sister Amanda's post from an hour ago suddenly appeared at the top of my feed. It was strange seeing her post, especially when I had been waiting here all this time, alone in the storm. The words of her post seemed to taunt me. Even if the heavy rain turn. The city upside down, the one who loves me will always be by my side. I couldn't bring myself to feel anything. Not even a ripple of emotion. It was as if her words had no effect on me anymore, even though they used to be enough to stir something deep within. But not now. Not after everything. The post also had a photo attached. I didn't need to guess who was in it. The people holding candles around Amanda's cake were my mom, dad, my younger brother Jim, and Ethan, my boyfriend. The photo had been taken just a few hours ago. Their smiles were wide, their happiness almost tangible. I could almost hear the laughter through the screen. But not for me. No, I wasn't part of their happiness anymore. I used to love Ethan's hands. The distinct joints, fair complexion, the faint pink at his knuckles. I had even joked that his hands could be hand models. He'd laugh, but I could see the hint of pride in his eyes. They were perfect hands. But now? Now, they seemed so distant, so out of reach. 5 hours ago, they had promised to pick me up from the airport. They'd said they'd be waiting in the lobby for me. But now here I was, alone, watching them in Amanda's photo, as if they had forgotten. All about me. As if I was just an afterthought. I knew the excuse: Amanda wasn't feeling well. Her health had always been fragile, and they couldn't leave her alone. So, they missed my pickup. Again. And it wasn't the first time. It wasn't the second time either. It had happened so many times before, and yet every time, I still hoped. Every time, I still believed they would care. But they never did. They always chose her. I closed my phone and stared blankly at the bustling airport around me. The world was going on, but I was stuck here, waiting for someone who would never come. I thought of the times I had missed, the times I had been forgotten. My college entrance exam pickup, missed. My coming-of-age ceremony, missed. My university admission banquet, missed. All the anniversaries, all the milestones, they were missed, one after another. And every time, the reason was the same. Amanda was sick. Amanda needed care. Amanda couldn't be left alone. I opened my phone's memo app. The same list, written over and over, 100 times, appeared on the screen. They missed me again. It had become a routine. Every time, they missed me. And every time, I added it to the list. 100 times. 100 times I had been ignored, forgotten, shoved to the side. But now, there was no anger. No bitterness. Just a strange calm. Maybe it was because I had accepted it. After all, what was one more missed event in a lifetime of them? Amanda. My sister, the one who had been lost to my parents before I was born. The day she was brought back was the day I turned 12. I still remembered it so clearly. She was frail, her face pale and gaunt. A bad person had taken one of her kidneys. I saw my parents crying, holding her as if she were a fragile doll. And I stood there, in my birthday hat, completely stunned, unable to understand what was happening. From that day on, things had changed. Everything shifted. They won. Ted me to protect her. To care for her. To make up for the years they had lost. They needed me to make up for the pain she had endured. So, I did. I gave all my love, all my care, all my effort to her. But how did she repay me? With a coldness I couldn't understand. She hated me. And I couldn't figure out why. I still remember the harsh words she spat at me on my birthday. Ever since you were born, Mom and Dad have never looked for me. Why should that be? Everything you have now should belong. Gee to me. You shouldn't have been born. Every year after that, my birthday was overshadowed by hers. My family would make all the good things for her. My younger brother, Jim, who used to cling to me, was now always by her side. And Ethan. Ethan started to look at her the way he used to look at me. With affection. With tenderness. But Ethan was my boyfriend, wasn't he? My family was my family, weren't they? Why was it that I was the one who was forgotten? Why was it always Amon? Who was the priority? No one ever saw it. No one ever noticed. They just told me, she's your sister. How could you think like that? Every time Amanda caused a storm, I was the one who had to calm it down. Every time she threw a tantrum, I had to step aside and let her have her way. And I did. Time and time again. Because I didn't want to upset anyone. I didn't want to make things worse. But this time, I was tired. I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of being the one who always had to step back. I had spent too many years trying to please everyone, trying to make up for something I had no control over. And now, it was all crashing down on me. I opened my eyes. The clock on my phone read 10 p.m. I hadn't even realized how long I had been sitting there, lost in thought. The rain was still pouring, the streets still flooded. I could hear the N. Was from the airport's bustling lobby, but it felt like a distant echo. I had no intention of going back. I had no intention of waiting any longer. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from my mom. Christina, where are you? We'll come pick you up soon. I'm sorry for keeping you waiting for so long. You know how Amanda's health is. If we don't take care of her, she'll be scared all alone at home. My chest tightened. My fingers hovered over the screen. I could feel the bitterness rise in me. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. I typed back quickly, trying to hide the sting in my words. No need. I'm fine. I booked a hotel room. I'll be staying here for the night. I put my phone down. This was it. No more waiting. No more hoping. I had let them down so many times. Now, it was their turn. Part 2, The Weight of Silence. The room was silent as I lay on the bed, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The lights were dim, casting soft shadows across the walls. The hotel room was quiet, too quiet. It felt like I was suspended in time, floating between the past and the present, caught in a moment where everything and nothing seemed to matter. I hadn't changed my clothes after I checked in. I was too exhausted, mentally and physically, to care. My body felt heavy, weighed down by 100 different emotions I didn't know how to process. The anger that had been building inside me over the years seemed to have drained away. There was no more fight left in me. It was as if I had given up on trying to change anything. I was just numb. The phone buzzed on the bedside table again. A message from my mom. The familiar ping of her notifications felt like a distant echo now. I didn't need to look at it to know what it would say. She was probably apologizing again, explain. How Amanda needed them, how her health was fragile, and how they couldn't leave her alone. As if I didn't already know. I picked up the phone, staring at the message for a moment before I decided to leave it unread. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to feel the guilt they always tried to put on me. The guilt that said I wasn't doing enough, that I wasn't being the daughter, the sister, the person they expected me to be. But I didn't care anymore. I dropped the phone back on the table and closed my eyes, trying to block out the thoughts that kept swirling in my mind. For once, I wanted silence. For once, I wanted peace. I wanted to sleep, to escape into a world where none of this mattered. But sleep didn't come. Instead, my mind kept drifting back to the airport, to the moment when I had seen Amanda's post. The photo of her with my family, all of them gathered around her as if she were the center of their world. I couldn't shake the image. It had become burned into my mind. Their smiles, their laughter, everything seemed so perfect, so fake. And there I was, sitting in the storm, alone, forgotten. For years, I had told myself that Amanda's needs were more important. That her health, her pain, her suffering deserved priority. But now I was starting to wonder if it was all just an excuse. An excuse for my parents to ignore me, to forget about me, to focus only on her. Every time they missed one of my big moments, every time they failed to show up for me, I convinced myself it was because of her condition. But what if it was more than that? What if they had just chosen her? I had spent my whole life catering to them, hoping that one day they would see me. That on E-Day, they would realize how much I had sacrificed, how much I had given up for them. But that day never came. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. The thought of it all made my chest tighten. I was tired. Tired of giving. Tired of being the person who always had to step back. Tired of being the one who always had to make excuses for them. My own life had become an afterthought, a footnote in the story of Amanda's suffering. And I was done. Done trying. To fix things, done trying to make them see me. I sat up on the bed, the weight of the realization pressing down on me. It wasn't just about Amanda. It was about everything, about my entire family. About the way they had treated me. About how I had let them. I had spent so many years bending over backward for them, trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, the perfect girlfriend. But in the end, it hadn't mattered. They had never seen me. Not really. I took a deep breath and stood up, walking over to the window. The rain was still falling outside, heavy and relentless. The streets were empty, the world washed clean by the downpour. It was as if everything had been reset, as if the world was starting over. Maybe I could start over too. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was trapped. I didn't feel like I had to live up to anyone's expectations. I didn't have to be the person they wanted me to be. I could just be me. I looked at my phone again. There were more messages, more notifications. A few from my mom, asking where I was and why I hadn't answered. A few from Ethan, asking if I was okay. And then there was a message from my brother Jim, asking if I could come home for a while. As if things would just go back to normal. As if I could just step back into the role they had assigned to me, as if nothing had changed. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was tired of being the one who always had to fix things. Tired of being the one who always had to clean up the mess. I had spent too long pretending that everything was okay, pretending that I was okay. But I wasn't. And I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I sat back down on the bed, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do now? What was my next step? The answers didn't come immediately. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be simple. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. I wasn't afraid of what I would lose. Because I had already lost it all. And maybe that was okay. Part 3, A Change of Direction. The next morning, I woke up later than I had planned. My mind was still foggy, and the weight of everything felt heavier than usual. The hotel room, despite its comfort, felt suffocating. I needed to get out. I needed to breathe. I needed to do something for myself, something that wasn't dictated by anyone else's expectations. I quickly packed my things, taking only what I needed. I didn't bother to check the time. I didn't need to. The thought of going back home, of facing my parents and Amanda, made my stomach turn. It wasn't that I didn't love them, no, it was more complicated than that. I was tired of playing the role they had assigned to me. I was tired of pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. It wasn't just their treatment of me, it was my own fault, too. I had allowed myself to be pushed aside. I had allowed it to happen for so long that now, it felt like I didn't even know who I was anymore. As I left the hotel, I walked through the rain-soaked streets, my thoughts scattered. It was a Sunday, so the city was quieter than usual. The rhythmic sound of the rain tapping against the pavement was oddly soothing, like it was washing away the last remnants of my old life. The feeling of solitude, however, wasn't as comforting as I had hoped. It felt like a void I couldn't fill, a hollow space that seemed to stretch on forever. I hadn't planned what to do next. I didn't have a clear direction, but I couldn't keep waiting around. Waiting for people who never came through. Waiting for things to change on their own. I had waited for so long, hoping for things to get better. But I had come to realize that nothing would change unless I made it happen. I decided to go to the office early. My work had always been my escape, my sanctuary from everything that had been happening at home. It was the one place where I didn't have to deal with the endless expectations or the emotional manipulation. It was the one place where I could be in control. When I arrived at the office, I was greeted by the usual hum of activity. The team was already busy, their focus on their tasks. I felt a sense of relief in the familiarity of it all. I didn't have to explain myself here. I didn't have to justify my decisions. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. A small victory in a world that had been nothing but chaos. But even as I sat at my desk, typing away at my tasks, my mind kept drifting back to my family. The message from Jim. The guilt from my parents. The concern from Ethan. It was hard to ignore, especially now that they were all trying to get in touch with me. The constant ping of my phone reminded me that they weren't just going to let me go that easily. Jim's message stood out. It was a simple request. Christina, can you come home for a while? There are important things we need to discuss. It irked me, honestly. Why was I always the one they called when they needed something? Why did I have to be the one to fix everything? They never called me unless it was to solve a problem, to smooth things over. It felt like I was just a tool for them to use, and that realization stung more than I wanted to admit. I ignored the message and continued working, but my thoughts kept swirling. I wasn't sure how to respond to any of them anymore. Part of me still wanted to believe that they cared, that they needed me. But another part of me knew better. I had given them everything, my time, my energy, my love, and it had never been enough. Not for them. At around noon, I got a call from Ethan. His name flashed across the screen, and my heart skipped a beat. I had been avoiding his messages for days, not sure what to say. The guilt I felt towards him was overwhelming. He had always been there for me in the past, but now, I wasn't so sure. It was hard to see him as the person I once trusted. I let the call ring through. I wasn't ready to face him yet. Not with everything that had happened. Not with the way he had sided with Amanda so easily, even when I needed him most. But the guilt was still there, gnawing at me. I had never imagined it would come to this. I had never imagined that my relationship with Ethan would become so complicated. It wasn't just his actions that bothered me, it was mine, too. I had let it get this far. I had let Amanda come between us, and I hadn't done anything to stop it. In fact, I had silently accepted it. I had convinced myself that it was okay, that I had to step aside for her. Now, it felt like everything. G was falling apart, and there was no one left to blame but myself. I decided to call him back, hoping that maybe we could talk things through. I didn't want to carry this guilt around anymore. I didn't want to feel like I was drowning in a sea of unresolved emotions. Maybe, just maybe, a conversation would bring some clarity. The phone rang once, twice, and then he picked up. "Christina," he said, his voice hesitant. "Are you okay? I've been trying to reach you." "I'm fine," I said, forcing the words out. "I just need some time to think." "I understand," he replied, his voice softening. "But I want you to know that I'm here for you. I always have been." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but it didn't make things any easier. It didn't change the fact that I felt betrayed. It didn't erase the feeling that I had been left behind, time and time again. "I don't know what I want anymore, Ethan," I admitted. "I don't know what's real and what's not. I've been trying to please everyone for so long, and now I don't even know who I am." He was quiet for a moment, and I could feel the weight of his silence. "I'm sorry, Christina," he finally said. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I replied, my voice breaking. "But sometimes, I think I hurt myself more than anyone else ever could." We both fell into silence again, the weight of the words hanging between us. The conversation felt unfinished, and I wasn't sure how to bring it to a close. But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't go back to how things were before. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. "I need to figure things out, Ethan," I said softly. "I'll talk to you later." "I'll be here," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. I ended the call and sat back in my chair. My eyes drifted to the window, where the rain had finally started to ease. The world outside was slowly coming back to life, just like me. Maybe it was time for me to start over. Maybe it was time to stop trying to fix everything for everyone else and focus on myself for once. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But I was finally ready to take control of my own life. To make the decisions that would shape my future, not theirs. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. Part 4: Breaking Free. The next few days felt like a blur. I was caught in the rush of my work, the never-ending stream of emails and meetings, but somewhere, deep down, I felt a shift within myself. I had stopped pretending. I had stopped waiting for things to change on their own. For the first time, I was making the choices. I was deciding who I wanted to be, who I was going to be. And for the first time, I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I was doing it for me. At work, I poured myself in. To my tasks. I felt a sense of purpose again, something I hadn't felt in a long time. The monotony of the office, the routine, the deadlines, they were comforting in their own way. It was predictable. It was mine. I didn't have to worry about anyone else's expectations. I didn't have to try to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. But even as I focused on my work, the reality of my family situation never completely faded. The calls kept coming. My mom, my dad, Jim, even Ethan, each on. Trying to reach me, trying to make me feel guilty, trying to pull me back into the life I had left behind. The messages were relentless, like an avalanche I couldn't escape. I could feel my patience wearing thin. Every time I picked up the phone, I was bombarded with their concern. Christina, where are you? Why won't you come home? Christina, your sister is missing you. Don't you care about her? Christina, we need to talk. We need to make things right. But the more they called, the more distant I felt. Every time I saw their names on my phone screen, I felt a pang of anger that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't about them anymore. It wasn't about their guilt or their attempts to pull me back into their orbit. It was about me. About my life. About my needs. And for once, I wasn't going to let anyone else decide for me. I didn't answer any of their calls. I didn't reply to their messages. I simply focused on my work and on the small steps I was taking to rebuild myself. I had made the decision to move forward, and nothing was going to derail that. A few days later, Jim showed up at my office unannounced. I had been in the middle of a conference call, and the sudden appearance of my younger brother at the door threw me off. I had been expecting the calls, the messages, but seeing him in person, standing there with that worried look on his face, felt like a slap in the face. It was as if they couldn't understand that I wasn't the same person anymore. Christina, Jim said softly, stepping into the room. Can we talk? I glanced at him, the tension in my chest rising. My stomach churned. It had been a while since I had seen him, and the sight of him standing there, asking for my attention, stirred something inside me, something I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. What do you want, Jim? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the walls I had carefully built around myself starting to crack. He looked taken aback by my tone but didn't falter. Mom and Dad miss you. Amanda, she's not the same without you. I felt a sharp sting at the mention of Amanda's name. I couldn't help it. Even now, after everything, she still had this power over me, this ability to make me feel small, insignificant. It made my blood boil. I don't think you understand. Jim, I said, my voice quieter now, but still filled with the frustration I had been holding in for so long. I've spent my entire life trying to please everyone else, trying to be the good daughter, the good sister. But when has anyone ever cared about what I need? When has anyone ever asked me what I want? Jim opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. No, let me finish. I've been invisible my whole life. Everything I did, everything I sacrificed, it was for nothing. And now, you want me to go back and pretend like everything is fine? I can't do that anymore. He stood there, silent for a moment, clearly processing my words. But instead of defending the family or offering empty reassurances, he sighed, a deep, heavy sigh that seemed to echo in the stillness of the room. I don't can. What happened to you, Christina, he said, his voice quieter now, almost sad. But I don't want to lose you. You're my sister. You've always been there for me. And I know things have been hard with Amanda, but we can't just pretend like you don't matter. I looked at him, my heart aching. I had spent so many years trying to be everything to everyone. I had hoped that, one day, they would see me. But now, I knew better. I wasn't going back to that. I wasn't going to let them drag me back in to their world of guilt and neglect. I matter, Jim, I said, my voice firm. But I've realized that I can't keep living for everyone else. I have to live for me. I can't keep sacrificing myself for people who don't see me. And if that means walking away, then that's what I'm going to do. His expression softened, but he didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, as if he understood, or at least, was starting to. He looked at me one last time before turning to leave. Just to think about it, okay, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We're still family. I didn't respond. Instead, I watched as he walked out of the office, the door clicking shut behind him. I sat there for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. We're still family. I couldn't deny that. But family didn't mean I had to sacrifice myself for them. It didn't mean I had to keep putting their needs above my own. I stood up from my desk and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. The rain had stopped, and the streets were beginning to dry. There was a quiet calm in the air, the kind that comes after a storm has passed. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of clarity. The road ahead was uncertain, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had made my decision. It wasn't going to be easy. But I was going to live my life for me. Not for Amanda. Not for Jim. Not for my parents. For me. And I knew that, no matter what happened, I was strong enough to handle it. Part 5, The Road Ahead. A week had passed since Jim came to see me at the office, and things hadn't gotten any easier. The calls from my family continued, the messages piled up in my inbox, and Ethan. Ethan was still trying to reach me. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had already made my decision, and I wasn't going to let anyone pull me back into the life I had left behind. It wasn't that I didn't care about them, it wasn't that at all. I did, in some strange way. They were still my family, no matter how much they had hurt me. But I had spent so many years sacrificing myself for them, trying to make them see me, trying to make them love me. And I had gotten nothing in return. Nothing except disappointment, neglect, and a sense of being invisible. It was time for a change. It was time to live for me. I walked into the office one morning, feeling the weight of my decision settle in my chest. The work was familiar, comforting, but there was a newfound sense of freedom in the air. I had taken back control of my life. For the first time in years, I was the one calling the shots. As I sat at my desk, I couldn't help but smile. The people I worked with, my colleagues, they saw me. They saw the real me. They didn't see me as someone's daughter or someone's sister. They saw me as Christina. A woman with her own dreams, her own goals. And that was enough. That was more than enough. I had learned something invaluable over the past few weeks. I had learned that I was more than just the role that had been assigned to me. I wasn't just the caretaker, the fixer, the invisible one. I was Christina. And Christina was strong. Christina was capable. Christina didn't need anyone else to define her. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to stand on my own. As the weeks went by, I found myself growing more and more confident. I took on new projects at work, I made new friends, and I finally started living for myself. There was still a sense of longing, of course. A part of me still wished that things could have been different with my family, but I knew deep down that I couldn't go back. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for people who didn't truly see me. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed with a message from Jim. I had been expecting it. He had been reaching out more lately, trying to make amends. But this message was different. He was asking if we could meet up for coffee. No guilt, no pressure. Just a simple invitation to talk. I hesitated for a moment, the familiar tension rising in my chest. But then, something inside me clicked. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was time to have the conversation I had been avoiding. Not with my parent. T.S. Not with Amanda. But with Jim. He was still my brother, after all. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward. Not as the family I had once known, but as something new. Something that was healthier. Something that respected my boundaries. I agreed to meet him. The coffee shop was small, cozy, and quiet. Jim was already sitting at a table by the window, waiting for me. When he saw me, he stood up, his face lighting up with a smile. But it was different this time. There was guilt in his eyes. No pleading. Just a genuine desire to talk. "Hey," he said as I sat down. "Thanks for meeting me." I smiled back, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. "Of course. It's been a while." We sat in silence for a moment, sipping our coffee. It felt oddly comfortable, like we were finally able to be in the same room without all the emotional baggage hanging over us. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Jim began, breaking the silence. "I didn't realize how much pressure we had put on you. I didn't see it until you walked away." I nodded, my heart pounding slightly. "It wasn't just you, Jim. It was all of us. I let it happen. I let myself be pushed aside for so long. But I'm done with that now." "I know," he said softly. "And I'm sorry. I wish I had done more to see you. To hear you. To understand." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in a long time. "It's not about apologies, Jim. It's about understanding that I'm not the same person I was before. I can't be who I was before. And I can't go back to being the person you all want me to be." He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with understanding. "I get that now. And I don't want to push you anymore. I just want to be your brother again. Without all the ye stuff." I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "That's all I've ever wanted. For you to see me. to see who I really am. We sat there for a while, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. For the first time, I felt like I could be myself around him. It felt good. When I left the coffee shop that day, I felt lighter than I had in years. There was no resolution with my parents. No confrontation with Amanda. But it didn't matter. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their love to feel whole. I had spent so long searching for validation in the wrong places, trying to prove my worth to people who never truly understood me. But now, I had found it within myself. I was enough. I always had been. A few months later, I found myself standing at the door of a new apartment. It was small, but it was mine. The walls weren't decorated with memories of a family that had never seen me. They were bare, ready to be filled with the things I loved. Thin GS that were truly mine. I had finally found my place in the world. And as I stood there, looking out at the city skyline, I realized something. I didn't need anyone else to define me. I had become the person I was always meant to be, the person I had been hiding from for so long. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the guilt, the expectations, the constant feeling of being invisible. I was free to be Christina. And that was all I needed.